one of the costs is your time. People are so time strapped today that, again, unless you are really below average in whatever you're doing, there's a very good chance they're going to continue to do business with you. The other piece of the moat that has become so critical, I mean, it's always been pretty critical, is talent management.
If once you have this amount, it doesn't matter what the world does, you're okay.
Yeah, and it really depends what your lifestyle is going to be after retirement and where you're going to live. We have clients in the Bay Area of San Francisco that they think they can't retire on anything under $20 million. It's the section that business owners really don't like to read about, and that is financial controls and EOS and how to make sure that you don't have fraud going on in your company. Well, the national fraud folks, I mean, it's some scary statistics that we put in the book.
Hello and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling.
And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast. Today I'm here with Dennis Stearns. He is the founder of Stearns Financial Group, and we're going to talk about everything from how to exit to creating moats to what's going on in the world with financial insecurities with a new administration coming in, and really kind of hit the broad topics of what's going on in the space of buying and selling companies. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate being here.
Yeah. So I always like to start off with some origin stories so people kind of get to know you. Could you give us a little bit of background of who you are, where you came from, and what has you, on a show about buying and selling businesses?
Well, yeah, when I was young, I was an ADHD kid, and my dad got me into chess to try to focus me down, and that ultimately created a chess career for me. Ended up being a master chess player, played on one of the winningest Pan American chess teams in U.S. history, and that chess background was very helpful for thinking about business. And so my dad also gave me a subscription to Forbes magazine when I was 11. And he said, pay particular attention to the stories about people who get knocked on their rear end and dust themselves off and get up. And I thought that was, 11-year-old me thought that was kind of an odd thing to say, but it was very helpful over the years because I started working with business owners when I got into wealth management very early in my career, and got to understand all the issues that small business owners have, and all the potential upside, but also all the headaches that come along with it.
Cool. So let's get into that. What got you into business advising, and you've got such a great balance of technology knowledge and financial knowledge, and being a chess master, you're very strategic in your thoughts. What pulled you into this space of helping business owners?
One of my very early clients when I was just a pup was a great business owner, and he just spent a lot of time with me talking about his business and how he got there, his origin story, and where he was going from there and what he was going to do with the money. And it was so fascinating to me working with him. And so I started seeking out more business owners to work with. And that experience, I've worked with hundreds now. Everyone has a unique set of facts and what they want to do with their money someday, and how much they want to give to their kids. They don't want them to be trust fund babies for the most part, but what do I want to do otherwise with my money for my community? And it goes on and on and on. So it's sort of like a chess game that every single one is very different. It has its own fingerprint, if you will, and I love that.
I can see how financial advising would be definitely like a chess match, because you got multiple sides, right? You got earnings and income, and then you got taxation and stuff, and then you've got long-term planning and making sure that your money lasts you your life, or at least or outlast your life if you're doing it right. I can see how that would be very much like the logic you'd put into the strategy of chess, because you've just got so many things you want to watch 4 or 5 moves ahead, and then examining external factors like what's the economy going to do. I think for the last 4 or 5 years we've been in this what I call a state of uncertainty. You don't know if the market's really crashing or not crashing. Are we really in a recession or not? This analyst says we are. This one says we're not. Everything's inflated like you wouldn't believe. Is that artificial or is that real? Right?
Yeah. Well, and the backbone of the stock market for decades and decades has been earnings. And earnings and profit margins lately have been at record levels. So it's been a beautiful time for a lot of companies. But the real question now is valuations are priced for perfection. So can they keep the earnings gravy train going? Again, some of Trumponomics will be helpful to that. Potential lowering of the corporate tax rate from 21 to 15, deregulation, a few of the other things will be helpful. There's a few things in there maybe not so helpful, like some of the tariff stuff. So, that is definitely an interesting analysis these days of how will earnings continue to grow, and will they continue to support more and more record levels. And then the other side of it is that our firm is now doing more in alternative investments than at any time in our history. So we're investing in toll roads and liquefied natural gas plants and all kinds of income producing real estate. A lot of those markets have bottomed out and are now moving back up. Niche private equity, venture capital. I mean, again, so the good news is, I guess, you don't just have chocolate and vanilla stocks and bonds anymore. You have a lot of other flavors that you can bring in that perhaps don't have quite the risk issues that stocks have at this point.
Yeah, and there's always been market corrections and everything else, and I don't know if we're due for one or way, way overdue for one. I don't think we're. I would say we're definitely not in a safe zone where it's just happening and we're recovering from it. I don't think that, but I'm no financial analyst by any means. I personally believe that our corporate model, publicly traded model, is inherently flawed. And I want your opinion on this. And the reason I think it's inherently flawed is, let's run a scenario. If I build a company for you, you and I go out and build a company, and we never take it public, right? But we build a company and we generate $100 million a year. You're paying to us, like it's doing $200-300 million or whatever the number is, so that your family's getting $50 million a year, my family's getting $50 million a year, and it just stagnates there. Are you okay that it doesn't grow as long as it stays steady and it's just cranking out money for the rest of your life and your children's life and their children's life?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But a public company couldn't do that.
No, because the CEO gets fired. If you're constantly not improving, if you're not better than last quarter, then your job's at risk, right? And I think that's the inherent flaw of how we've designed the public markets, because if I buy a stock today in Microsoft, I want my stock value to increase. Although Microsoft's an amazing company, and if it never increased over what the revenue it's putting out on its best year in the last 3 years, I don't know if they're at a lot of times these companies try so hard to move the needle, they end up in a loss, right? They're doing things to try to make that difference, to where if they just idled back and did what they really did well, they could be money generating machines for, year after year after year after year.
Yeah.
And it's not, I mean, I still believe it's innovate or die, but there's a lot of the stuff that has to happen that's above and beyond innovation. They're buying companies they shouldn't buy. They're doing whatever they can to artificially move the needle, just to keep a job. So that's the one thing I think's inherently flawed with a public stock market type of driven economy. Sometimes it's good for a CEO just to maintain something that's running really well.
Yeah, and having worked with strategy for a number of public companies, I think what that balance has become is more of a quarterly focus. But every company I've worked with still has a pretty robust 5-year plan, and they're doing things to make that 5-year plan happen. The problem is you do get just sucked into the vortex of, hey, I got to report, something next quarter. I mean, Elon Musk struggled with that mightily in the early days of Tesla, and
Oh yeah.
so it's a challenge for anybody running a public company.
You have an interesting evaluation model to make sure you have a competitive difference. What you and I call a moat. Can you explain that? I see you reference in the notes I'm looking at of leaks and crocodiles. So, what's your thoughts on becoming competitive in the space and staying competitive in the space and creating a way to differentiate yourself from the customers?
Yeah,
Sorry,
well,
competitors, I should have said.
yeah. Well, in our firm, we manage over $2 billion, and we have done a lot of moat analysis of public companies in the past.
Hmm.
And Morningstar was one of the first to come out and really popularize that concept for public companies. And we wrote a number of papers and reports on that in the last 15 years. And then we started to notice that a lot of the things were important to private companies as well. So we developed a moat analysis tool, which, if you go to the business owner section of our website, you can get a free moat analysis. And the concept there is, how much of a competitive advantage do you have? And is it something that could be eroded by the techno industrial revolution? You have competitors coming from places they never came from before. You have customers. This was a theme of my Ninja Entrepreneur book that just came out. You have customers with more power than they've ever had in the history of customers. And so if you're a customer, hey, that's great. If you're selling them stuff, ooh, you better make sure that your moat has a lot of water, a lot of crocodiles, and that you're not just kind of resting on the laurels of whatever you did the last decade.
It's funny is I've got even I mean, I probably have about 140,000 followers across all my channels. My biggest channel currently is LinkedIn, and I've been cleaning it up quite a bit. It was higher at one point, but I've been removing a bunch of dead users off of it. I think I have close to 80,000 followers on there, and even at that level, at that few, there's been a few times where I'll give you a good example. We had a problem with Ford Motor Company and honoring their warranty with our car, and I tweeted out to my then probably close to 90 to 100,000 followers back when I was doing all the marketing stuff on all combined on my channels. Um, I sent out a message saying, yeah, told basically what was going on and how they're violating their thing. And within an hour, they'd fixed my wife's car for free when they told us it's going to be $7,000 in
Wow,
3 days. They
that's
basically
great.
somebody called the service center here in where we're at and said, no, 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 that is covered. We'll send you the part. Take care of that. And I publicly made it known. Thank you. But you'd be surprised if you've got more than, say, 25, 30,000 followers. These companies are listening, and they know how viral something like that can go and how fast it can go viral. And you can get some stuff done. That's not the first time. I've done it another time too. jokingly, I've tweeted out on, like, with me sitting at the ocean, I'm 12 miles from the ocean. Then I'm running meetings here on Zoom, and people think this is a backdrop, right? And then Zoom sends me a bottle of wine and a canvas bag and a coffee mug and a bunch of other stuff for tweeting them out to my large audience because they've seen it, right? I got a swag bag, nice bottle of probably $100 champagne, and like it was a few $100 worth of stuff. So yeah, I could see the power of having an audience and what that means to these big brands and these companies. If you're a publicly traded company, a good example was the guy United, the guy that was a musician, and they broke his guitar. He wrote a song, United breaks guitars in their stock tanks.
Yeah,
And
and part of the moat strategy 10 years ago is still true today.
Mhm.
One of the greatest things that I've seen from business owners is staying close to their customer, which sometimes is hard as a business is growing, and that's one of the mistakes that often is made is that the original founder gets too far away from the end customer and has too many filters and isn't getting necessarily all the feedback loop that they need. But it's also brand new stuff like marketing and sales. In Ninja Entrepreneurs, we identified a whole bunch of companies that are now getting paid for their marketing as opposed to paying for marketing. And you got one of the top golfers in the world who is a golf fitter. I mean, he fits the club itself, kind of a interesting niche. And so everybody thought he was crazy to put how he does it out on YouTube. It's sort of like the master disclosing all their secrets. And the fact is, he was crazy like a fox. And so, in Ninja, we talk about the fact that not only is he getting paid for his marketing, but now there's something like 5% of the people who watch those YouTube videos that come in for a professional fitting. And because of the, unique thought leader process, they're willing to pay incredible amounts of money to actually do that. So, you think of YouTube as something that allows you to fix your car or do other things without bringing somebody in. Well, this guy just reversed the switch on that whole thing.
when we talk moat, a lot of people think it's like intellectual property or some strategic advantage of stuff, but sometimes that moat can be. I got introduced to a new mode of moat that I didn't think of when I interviewed a guy who owned an accounting firm, a bookkeeping company. He does outsourced bookkeeping. And I said, well, how do you have a moat with that? Because anybody can learn bookkeeping, start taking on clients, teach people the way they want it done, and have a bookkeeping company. There's no barrier to entry. The software's too cheap, and you're competing with clients. He goes, he says, yeah, but once you've landed good customers, it's really difficult to move,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So the moat isn't in the like you versus me. The moat is like once I'm with you and I like the way you do it, I have to really dislike the way you do it because it's difficult and expensive to move from you to me, to another individual. So, what are the types of moats that you see that give a company strategic advantage?
Yeah, well, the one you just mentioned, the switching costs, one of the costs is your time. People are so time strapped today that, again, unless you are really below average in whatever you're doing, there's a very good chance they're going to continue to do business with you. The other piece of the moat that has become so critical, I mean, it's always been pretty critical, is talent management. And in the environment we've been in lately, it has been so difficult to find good people. And many of our business owner clients are, some of their best people are thinking about retiring and they're trying to bring in the next generation and the next generation. There's culture clashes and all kinds of things that have been daunting for many of the business owners. And so we've been working with a group at a business innovation lab that actually does big ideas for business owners. And one of their big ideas projects is around how do I create my employee mix as a competitive advantage? And that's a natural for most companies. But, when you actually get in there and talk to a lot of business owners, maybe they have 20 or 30% of their employees that are A's, that are aces. And you'll invariably get 20, 30%. Maybe they were hired during the pandemic that are C's. Occasionally they show a B, or occasionally they show an A. And of course, the business owner, hope springs eternal. Well, maybe with an additional amount of training and mentoring, they can be a B or an A more of the time. Well, maybe with new augmented intelligence rules, and we just had this happen with Copilot, maybe they actually suddenly Copilot plus the employee goes from a C to a B. Now that is a game changer. But thinking about your talent and not being afraid of going out there and saying, "I'm going to top grade. I'm going to take all my C's, and if I can't make them B's or A's, I'm going to find somebody who will be a B or A."
I was telling you before we hit record that I was talking to a gentleman who owned a software company and sold it off to his business partner. They had 80, 90 employees. And then a couple years later, he decides he's going to start something else. Now he's got 10 high-level engineers using Copilot and augmented AI tools. They're using AI tools to expedite the level of writing code. And he thinks that his team, either now or fairly soon, can generate as much code and as much progress on each project as 80 to 90 of those engineers before with a team of 10, right? They can just test faster, they can debug faster. Everything about coding the AI, short of formulating the idea and what they want the user interface to look like, that's what they spend a lot of time. A lot of the code and the testing and the regression testing and integration testing of code, the AI is doing better than most humans could do already. Do you see that going across the board as a competitive advantage if you just have better AI augmentation into your business already, or as you think that's going to level out and everybody has to do it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do think that eventually everybody's going to need to be pulled along on this train. There's a lot of doubters, and I get it. Some of the early stuff, ChatGPT would hallucinate on different issues, and that's a term they use in technology to say that occasionally it just sort of lost its mind. Well, if you have this working internally in a company or in a customer interface, you don't want something hallucinating and creating, some problems. But those problems have been less and less. And this is the trap we fall into in technology all the time. We see the first mover and we think, oh, this isn't going to be a long term thing because of X, Y, or Z. And then they fix X, Y, or Z. And then it's like, oh, wow, this is this is amazing. And everybody forgets it was not Steve Jobs that created the smartphone. It was a team at Qualcomm that created the smartphone. Steve Jobs just figured out how to do it better. And so, again, I think we're on the cutting edge of this whole. And again, I don't use the word artificial intelligence anymore. I use augmented intelligence because that's really what it is. It's not necessarily replacing a human. It's making a human better and more productive at what they do.
They're really pushing autonomous agents, but I haven't found a good one yet. I haven't seen anybody do anything where it's totally autonomous, where it doesn't have to have you doing something to tell it what to do. I'm sure they're coming. The thing that I find interesting is like they're fixing those problems, like you said, the hallucination. I always used to joke like when you ask ChatGPT in the early days, it's like asking an 8-year-old if he really knows the answer, he's going to tell you all the details because he's proud he knows it, right? And it's going to be right because he knows it. But if he doesn't, he's not going to tell you he doesn't know anything. He's going to, I have an 8-year-old. If you got to watch it because if she doesn't know it, she'll just make up a story about it.
Yeah.
And ChatGPT would do that, right? Just this week, I just read a newsletter this morning that Amazon they're a little late on the game, but they released, I think, 6 new models this week. And one of them is an hallucination detection model based off mathematical things, so you can test the other models whether or not it's hallucinating, and it's very accurate. So they're going to solve that problem, right? They're going to solve that problem whether they have to put a third party and another AI checking one, checks and balances or whatever, but they'll find a way to solve it.
Well, and that's the crazy thing. If you had told somebody 10 years ago that we would have artificial or augmented intelligence software that's actually back checking against other AI, against hallucinating, they would have said, what kind of new world are we in? And so, one of the things we talk about in the Ninja Entrepreneurs book, it's the section that business owners really don't like to read about, and that is financial controls and EOS and how to make sure that you don't have fraud going on in your company. Well, the national fraud folks, I mean, it's some scary statistics that we put in the book about how many companies are losing 2, 3, 5% of revenues to fraud and don't even know it. Well, now they're coming out with augmented intelligence detectives. And essentially, those detectives are like another person on your staff that's going to help ferret out some of that stuff. And again, the sky's the limit. That's part of the moat, right? I mean, if you're losing 2 or 3 or 5% of your revenues to fraud, that is not a healthy moat around your business.
I didn't even know they existed until I was looking. I just got myself into the mergers and acquisitions area. I was doing real estate, and I got my hands on a company that I was looking at buying, and their books was such a mess. They had already told us that at one point they had an employee, a relative that was embezzling, and they got that under control. But their books were such a mess. It was two people running it, two family members running it, that I was 99% sure that the one doing the financials was embezzling also. She just refused to give certain reports. The medicine, things just didn't make sense. I've never seen books done that way. So I figured out like who solves it. And then that's when I learned the world of this, like, forensic CPA. And they had $1 million tax liability too. And I found a forensic CPA firm that was, I found a tax advising firm that owned a CPA firm that had forensic accountants on it. And I had retained them to like, look, we're going to tear this thing apart and put it back together. Then we're going to go to the IRS and negotiate on that $1 million settlement, because they never even tried, right? They just, they took the assessment that the IRS said that they owed them and said, I guess so, and started paying payments on it. That said, the IRS and one of the bank loans blocked the sale. They agreed to the sale. But when they took it to them and told them they were going to transfer the sale and the liability, they said, "Oh no, you're not." So
yeah, and we're brought in frequently, usually 2 to 3 years ahead of the sale of a business. Sometimes, however, we're brought in 6 months ahead of the sale, and we're working with the attorney and the CPA and maybe the M&A guy, and we're trying to figure out, okay, where are the soft spots of the business? And so we were brought in on one very late in the game, and everybody in the business owner had developed what he called a dream team, and I said, okay, who's not a dream on this team? Well, we've had our accountants for a long time, and when we were 3 million of sales and growing to 5, and they grew, and we went from 5 to 10 million of sales, and they grew with us, and they're okay, but they're not great. Well, he did not want to rock that boat so late in the game. Well, guess what? We get into negotiations with a roll up private equity entity, and all of a sudden, we're seeing several $1 million shaved off the potential acquisition of the company as their people got in. Now, in this case, it was not fraud, it was just sloppiness. And one of the things that, again, it's wonderful that so many business owners are very loyal to their people, but at some point, you've really got to kick the tires hard if you're thinking about exiting. Yep.
how do you see? Let's switch gears a little bit, because I really want to cover, without being very political, we've got something happen. We got a change of of command, and they've already promised to be very disruptive. Intentionally and probably rightfully so. We've got some very, very bad overspending going on. We got some national debt's going crazy. But I think you called it the X factor or the Elon Musk factor coming into this new economy next year and the following 3 or 4 years after when they're doing their cuts and stuff. How do you see that impacting the small and medium business markets into, I guess every market's different, but I know we're already in a state of uncertainty. Do you think that that's going to help it, hurt it? What do you think? What do you see what's your forecast of what that's going to do? I guess is the question I have.
Well, and so, Trumponomics 1.0, when we developed all the strategies around that, it was pretty straightforward. We kind of knew 80% at least of what was going to be happening. Trumponomics 2.0, we also know probably about 80%, but there are some things, for example, the tariffs, how much of it's negotiating tactic versus actual reality. And you always have to think of the tariffs at a wholesale level, not a retail level. And that is a key distinction. But, I'll give you an example. Walmart's head CEO said a couple of months ago that they were rolling back prices on over 7,000 areas because of inflation coming down so much. Well, he just came out and said because of some of the Trumponomic tariffs, they were probably going to be rolling up prices. And so, how much inflation will actually be generated? We're wary and cautious, but we're not paranoid about that particular one because we think that a lot of it is negotiating tactics. And we think that, again, if you think of it the wholesale level versus retail level, we think that the amount of pass through versus what companies can absorb, it's going to be reasonable. Now, with that being said, we have half a dozen companies that we work with right now doing business coaching that are stockpiling some key things in their business ahead of their, the perceived tariffs. And so, and in a few cases, we've said, hey, yeah, that's a great idea. In one case, they were maybe going a little too far afield with it. But again, back to your comment that there's a high degree of uncertainty. And then the Elon Musk X factor. Right before the election on the campaign trail, Elon Musk said over and over and over again, expect hard times ahead temporarily. For whatever reason, the media on either side didn't really pick that comment up, and most people, just because of all the noise in the election, most people just kind of let that one go by. But Elon Musk is one of those guys that if he says it, and if he's in control of something like, I don't know, the director of government efficiency, you better pay attention. And Swami, his partner in this, he's also a guy that can, as you say, create a lot of disruption. And so the question will be, will they try to shrink the government as much as Argentina has shrunk their government? Now, it's apples and kumquats. I mean, the Argentine government is so much smaller than the United States government, and they're going to run into all kinds of problems and issues. But if they were actually able to shrink the government as much, there's going to be rolling recessions in a lot of different sectors of the economy. And so, we have been advising some clients lately who are in sectors that may get impacted. Okay, if you've been thinking about exiting, let's fast forward all the work that we're doing because, we don't know whether Elon's tough times ahead is a year or 2 years. Now, our suspicion is that even that is not going to be as bad as Elon makes it sound, because ultimately, I don't think that Trump wants to tank the economy to be the guy that fixed the federal deficit problem. I'm not, he seems to want to be the guy that leaves on a high note with a booming economy. And everybody forgets it's not 4 years. We got a 2-year fuse to the midterm elections that are very critical for the Republicans. So, we're in, again, back to the cautious but not paranoid frame of mind, that a lot of business owners just need to be a bit more cautious. And I'll tell you, one of our other Sum of All Fears workshop piece that we did recently that surprised me is the potential impact of China invading Taiwan. And originally, that was more like a 2028, 2030 issue because of the Chinese maybe getting parity with their Navy, with our Navy, which I actually think it would take decades longer to ever get parity with our Navy, but at least be more of a threat to our carrier groups coming in. Well, the Chinese now have drones that swim, drones that fly, drones that do both to attack our carriers. It doesn't matter that their new Zhao class submarine sank in port not too long ago because those drones are deadly to many of our ships, and we're creating anti-drone technology to all of that. So there's been a lot of discussion that China desperately needs the advanced chip making of Taiwan to stay in the economic game because they have a lot of problems in their economy, and that they might, there's 50% chance that they might invade in the next 3 years, and it's not 5, 6, 7 years out. Well, 50% is not 100%, but we're taking it seriously. And again, it gets back to, what's the plan for the business? We have some businesses now that they don't really have an intent to exit, but they are checking all of their supply chains again. So everybody forgets that the pandemic supply chain problems, only about a third of those problems got actually fixed. Most of the rest were Band-Aids. And so, this is one of those times where progressive companies who are looking toward the future, they are kicking the tires again on their supply chains, making sure that they don't have a rude awakening if we see parachutes over Taiwan.
Yeah, I have one of my colleagues who's looking at buying companies, and he likes training companies. I like them too. I mean, especially trainings that have recurring revenue models. And one of the companies he's looking at, he says, "Hey, can you be a partner with me on this if we get interested?" I said, "Depends. Why would you want me as a partner? Because I'm curious. I like the guy." He says, "Well, I need a disabled veteran because they have disabled. There's a disabled veteran certified company in most of their contracts with the government." I was like, "Are you sure you want to do that right now?" He's, "What do you mean?" He says, "You're wanting to buy a company who gets most of their money. They're making, I think, $5-6 million a year, but they're making most of their money training in government, institutions and stuff. When we're about to have a disruptor cutting that budget like you wouldn't believe."
Yep.
Right.
Well,
I think now's a very good time for him to sell that company. And now's not a very good time to buy that company unless you have the war chest to outlive that adjustment and the skills to pivot
yep.
and
Yep.
to understand how to pay to keep your team around and pivot and to make it work. But
Well, and
that's
that is a great, great example, Ron, of the things that people don't think about. That people think about, oh, well, it'd be great if they cut half the government. But the fact is that there are so many tendrils out into the private sector.
hmm
And that's the what's called the second and third order effect that
yeah.
I think, again, is probably the reason that Elon said, expect tough times ahead.
On the Social Security front, I've always heard different politicians, and I don't know enough about it to know whether or not they're BS. I don't have a decent enough BS meter on it. I've heard more than one, more than a dozen probably, politicians and experts say the way to fix the Social Security system is to quit stealing from it, to make the Social Security system back to what it was initially designed for, and all the money that goes into reasonable investments, and the only money that comes out of it goes to paying the people who contributed to it. There's too many pet projects and government other stuff that's funded from Social Security income, the money that comes from our checks and stuff that we send to them, that's the only reason this thing is failing, is that we've stolen from that coffer way too many times and it's starting to get empty. The other one, like you said, the medical side of it is we're just living longer, and because of the way the system is and the constant have to need to improve and the same systemic problem I told you earlier, if my earnings aren't more than last year, then I have to then I get fired. That causes rippling effects too, right? So if I'm a medical doctor or a medical pharmaceutical company or something that, in that space, if I don't produce more revenue this year than I did last year, then I don't have a job. Well, we better raise the price to EpiPens and common statins and other stuff that people need on a day-to-day basis. If I raise the price, then my revenue goes up, and therefore I still got a job next year. Well, that only happens so many years before everything's just kind of crazy and bloated. And with us living longer, I think we've got ourselves in a cascading mess where, like you said, our health care costs are through the roof. Our healthcare, I would say, is a C on the on a scale. If you look at world class healthcare, we're probably a B or a C, as opposed to, well, I don't think in the United States we give people world class healthcare like some other people do.
Well, yeah, and the healthcare system now, is a 15-minute appointment, and that's why so many people, including many of our business owners, are going to a concierge medicine,
Hmm.
where they can get more time with the doc, and they've got teledoc things, so they don't even have to run into the office every time they have something going on. Now, we're very close to the healthcare system because we do a lot of work with several venture firms that are healthcare focused. And so we kind of know all the stuff coming down the pike, and it's generally very positive, very good if you want to extend both the quality and quantity of your life. The things coming down the pike in the next 10 years are going to blow everybody's minds. Here's the problem, back to your comment, is that the thing that would have killed you will get patched up or fixed up, and then you'll live another 5 years, and then something else that would have killed you in the old days gets patched up, fixed up, and you keep doing that. And they're plugging stuff in and out of our bodies like Legos, and it will create more and more pressure on the Medicare system. So the time to fix some of that is actually now. So that's where I've got fingers and toes crossed that that the folks going in for the disruption are going to try to get ahead of that curve before the curve crushes us.
So, going for that, what as you're a business owner now, and you're thinking, I'm going to retire in the next, say, 10 years, what, or even like shorter time frame, 10 years or sooner, what are the things you think that they should be really concerned about and really practicing and getting done to make sure, especially with everything we've talked about in play, right? The economy is good, is uncertain. There, if you've got any government contracts, that's going to be really disruptive over the next few years because we don't know exactly what's going to happen there. And I look forward to what happens for my children. I don't look forward to what happens to what we have to go through to get there. I really think I'm a believer it needs to be done. I think we're overspending. I just think it needs to be done with surgical precision instead of two guys with machetes, right? That's the concern I have with those two. It's like, Elon has a history of, if you don't do it, I'll just do it myself. I was telling you the story beforehand where, when he bought X or Twitter, and he had multiple data centers, and his engineers were, the engineers at X were refusing to shut one down. The story is he flew out there with one guy and they just started unplugging stuff, right? I'm a big believer that that's what's going to happen in the next couple of years. There's just going to start unplugging people and agencies in whole and seeing what breaks.
Yep. Yeah, and so this kind of environment, we've always been big believers in having a master plan, essentially the personal financial plan running alongside the business plan,
Mm,
and having those inform each other as to what you need to do. Well, I'll double or I'll triple down on that in the environment that we're coming into because the business uncertainty again is going through the roof. Now the opportunities in business are going through the roof. That's again our research in the Ninja Entrepreneurs book, that opportunity threat matrix. Both sides have been going up incredibly. So this is a time to be figuring out your risk mitigation. Don't just be focused on the bright shiny object of the fun stuff of the growth of the business, but make sure that you've got both good offense and defense going on in the business. Some of the things we've already talked about, making sure your lines of credit are solid, depending on the type of business and how close you run on your working capital and all that good stuff. And again, this is where I think the personal plan can come into play. How much do you want to have personally to basically say "f you" at some point to the business, and be able to not worry as much if some of these spookier scenarios we've been talking about happens in the next 2 years, 5 years, whatever, that you are in a place where the business isn't all the the chips you have on the table. And so I think, doing a deep tire kick on all of that, again, back to some of the basic blocking and tackling of making sure that you have the right people around you, making sure they're getting trained well. Cutting training budgets right now seems kind of crazy, and I would, well, I am having my dozens of employees being trained in augmented intelligence, and
yeah.
so we can either help clients think through what they can do better, or we can do it internally. And several of our business owners are offering like $5,000 and $10,000 bonuses for the best idea they come up with on how to use Copilot. So those are the kinds of things that, again, I think business owners generally are pretty action oriented. But again, the problem might come up with the company that's gone from 3 million to 5 million quickly, and the owner is dealing with a whole bunch of moving parts that he wasn't used to before, or they've gone from 5 million to 10 million, and oh my goodness, the inflection point of all the different parts is driving the owner crazy. That's the problem, is that tyranny of the urgent always gets in the way of doing all these things that we're talking about right now, trying to make the moat better and prepare for the future.
So you said something that caught my attention. You talking about FU money or whatever, the F off level where when I was a child, as I used to like, I'm gonna grow up be a millionaire, and now you look at it like that's just not enough to be. That's not $1 million is no longer F off money. From your perspective, what's that level? If I'm a business owner, CEO, and I've got a great running business, and I'm building wealth on the side, I've got a stock portfolio, real estate portfolio, I'm building something detached from my business to make sure I'm comfortable. What do you think that number is today in our current economy to be truly? I mean, I know like other podcasts, Joe Rogan has it. He got $100 million for, that's definitely, I think that 100 million is like, okay, if I got that tucked away somewhere, I could live on an island or buy an island if I wanted to. But there's got to be a level way lower than that. It's like, look, if once you have this amount, it doesn't matter what the world does, you're okay.
Yeah, and it really depends what your lifestyle is going to be after retirement and where
Mhm.
you're going to live. We have clients in the Bay Area of San Francisco that they think they can't retire on anything under $20 million.
I
Most,
live in the vineyards of in the vineyards of Sonoma County, 65 miles north of San Francisco.
yeah.
It's expensive here. Gas is $5.50 a gallon sometimes.
Oh,
So,
wow.
you know,
Okay. And so, the majority of our clients are more Midwest. I mean, we have a number of Florida clients and other
Mhm.
parts of the country, but for the most places that our clients live, they don't need 20 million. And many of them, I mean, what we do in our master planning is we create this vision of, okay, what are you going to do after the business is not paying for all the little pieces of your lifestyle, and how many last hurrah trips are you really going to take? Some of our business owner clients say, "Hey, I've traveled too much. And they're buying an RV and they're going around the country." So when we put a pencil to all that, generally you can do pretty darn well with 5 million after tax
Okay.
if you appropriately allocate that. Again, I would say beyond traditional stocks and bonds, you can end up with an after tax number that, in addition to your Social Security, will be enough to meet your lifestyle.
So that's interesting because I thought the number would be between 5 and 10. I thought, I think depending on where you live, between 5 and 10, uh, we're here to help take care of family and be close to family when and that those family members are in their 80s. In the eventual, everybody goes at some point. His mom lived to be 97 or 98. I think she passed away on her 98th birthday or something. So be a while, but we'll be here in California until he no longer needs our assistance. But I can't promise you we're staying here, right? There's just as a small, a guy who loves small businesses and as a person who owns a few of them, this is not the perfect environment for us, right?
Well, we had a small business owner in San Diego that we were running different scenarios for their financial intelligence
Hmm.
roadmap, which is something that we've actually trademarked our whole process. And that particular client, as much as they love San Diego, when they looked at the lifestyle they could have retiring in other parts of the country, they ended up coming to actually North Carolina and back where they were closer to some family. And, they were, you remember the Top Gun series with Tom Cruise,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, and the newest one called Maverick. And so the analogy we use is, how as you're flying down through the canyon of retirement, whatever it is, because we've got 20 different flavors of that now. I mean, it used to
Hmm.
be you retired and you retired. Now it's all kinds of different variations. Well, as you're coming down through that canyon, how close are your wingtips to the canyon walls? And so the San Diego client, uh, when we finished all of our scenario analysis, they said, "Ooh, our wingtips are kind of close to those walls. So if
Hmm.
something weird happens in the economy or something else, we could be in a world of hurt." And so now they're flying in the Grand Canyon, and they're not close to the canyon walls at all. They're de-stressed. So yeah, we're that's another thing where we're kind of living in a brand new world.
So,
Yeah.
let's cover how do people find your book? You've mentioned your book a couple of times. It sounds really intriguing. I read a lot. I'd like to put my hands on it. And then, how do people? Is it we can find this on Amazon or?
Yep, you can find it on Amazon, and you can get the audio version is being released maybe this week. The back to what you just talked about. You can also find my previous book, Fourth Quarter Fumbles, on Amazon, and Fourth Quarter Champions. So, top three reasons why a lot of
Mhm.
business owners don't want to sell their business or don't want to retire is, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, and with my life, and because this is my passion.
Yeah.
And so figuring that out really is critical for some people.
Yeah, I thought I was just gonna volunteer at the self-help organization and fish all the time and, pick up another startup at some point and learn really quick. As much as I love fishing, I can't do it every day, and as much as I thought, the income coming in would substantiate, 14-year-olds eat a lot. Right? My growing kids, I have a 13 about turn 14. Back then he was younger, but I was like, a lot of it was inflation. Things became and way more expensive than I expected, and I think that has to go into this planning too. What is the economy going to do? How far is your money going to go? When that's why you're like, if you told me between 5 and 10 million, I would lean towards a 10, just because where I live it's expensive,
Right.
and because of the uncertainty of how far will that dollar go, right?
Yep.
You know,
And the statistics are that about 15% of people can actually retire, play golf, go fishing, maybe go do things with grandkids or whatever, and that's enough. But that's only 15% of people. So the other 85, they get into depression. By the way, one of our offices handles gray divorce. They are the gray divorce whisperer for the country, and that trend is rising rapidly. And more frequently, it's the wife filing for divorce, not the husband. So, so that gray divorce piece is never fun. And so, all of which is to say, you'll be healthier and happier if you can actually figure out what you're going to do after the business.
it's funny as I was married once before, and if my kids don't listen to this show, I don't think they even know I was married once before. I traveled so much when I worked for Lockheed Martin. I thought it was disrupting our marriage because we were having problems and fighting. And then, so I moved to a different company, that I didn't have to travel so much, and I just realized that it just wasn't working. When we were around each other more, we fought more. It wasn't because I was traveling so much. I think that might be the case a lot of times in these great divorces, is that you take an entrepreneur who's really worked hard and had a lot of hours in the office, and he's got some marital problems, and now he's done, and he comes home and he's around the wife all the time, and he can annoy her for full time now, as opposed to just a few hours a week. People are people, and they just won't tolerate it, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, we have an entrepreneur who retired, and the first week after retiring, he went into the kitchen and without asking his wife, he rearranged everything in the kitchen. This was not a great idea. And I got a text from the wife actually saying, "What is going on? And can you do an intervention here?"
right, this man is clearly bored. Let's find him something to do.
Exactly.
That was my wife's thing. Like, well, you are clearly bored. Go find something that intrigues you and curious. Curious. Because I had, I mean, it was not just like I was bored. I've always had issues with low levels of depression and stuff, and it was getting worse. Right? It's just like, I ended up in a car wreck, and that made things worse. Right? So it was one of those. It's just a cascading thing where, like, you better go find something to occupy yourself. But
Yeah.
so people can find your book on Amazon. What was the name of it one more time?
Ninja Entrepreneurs is the latest book.
Ninja Entrepreneurs on Amazon. And then if somebody wants to reach out with you and work with you, I just realized we're at an hour 14 minutes. We're going to have to wrap this up. If somebody wants to reach out with you, work with you, have you on their show, whatever, if they want to contact you, what's the best way you want them to do that?
Yeah, well, stearnsfinancial.com. A lot of ways to contact us, including the business owner landing page.
Cool. There's a lot of tools on there for them, right?
Yep.
Cool. I
Exactly.
appreciate you. Is there any final thoughts? If somebody can remember one or two things from the show, what would you want them to walk away with? I guess would be the best way to wrap this up.
Well, our mantra is plan ahead, play smart. Uh, I think that probably has never been more important than where we are today.
Yeah, I believe that 100%. Thank you, Dennis, for being here today. Hang out for just a few minutes, and we'll call that a show.
Okay. Thank you, Ron.
I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between 5 million and 30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT-enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace, how to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.